Well, welcome to the ORH podcast. And as we mentioned, we said we would do an emergency podcast if Bloomfield got the sack. And it has happened a day after we recorded that episode. So you're joined by myself, Finley Cannon, and as always, Adam Driscoll, as we talk all things Matt Bloomfield's departure and who the bookies and we think will be the next Luton manager. How are you doing, Adam?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. Long time no speak. I think I finished our chat the other night by saying I'd be amazed if we were doing another podcast before the Mansfield preview. But here we are, little more than 48 hours later. We are having that emergency podcast. So, yeah, I mean, I have to say I'm a little bit surprised that they've made the decision because I didn't think they would do it this early. But then again, they did hamstring themselves last season with, giving Edwards 26 games or something like that. So, I guess to start off, it's a fair point to say fair play to the board for making the call that everybody can see needed to happen, and making it with enough time in the season to go that we can still achieve something positive. But yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting sort of half an hour or so that we dissect where we're going to go next.
Yeah, and before that, don't forget to check out oakroadhatter.com for all of the latest content from us, including some really interesting written pieces that will be going live over the next couple of days surrounding all things Luton Town managers and the situation at the club at the moment. But let's start by talking about Matt Bloomfield's time at Luton, because he has been relieved of his duties as Luton manager after 33 matches in charge, with 12 wins, 7 draws and 14 losses. And that's a win percentage of 36%, Adam.
Yeah, and it's never really worked, has it? Bloomfield is clearly a nice guy. I think he will still go on to have a good career as a manager at maybe League One or maybe even Championship level. But I think for us, it was the wrong appointment. Maybe the right appointment at the wrong time. And I've seen other fans kind of label it as that as well, and I would tend to agree with that. But he comes in January when the club is in a really tough spot, a losing mentality, players that are lacking confidence, has to make a quick assessment on the squad, and then obviously try and bring in some fresh faces as well, which he did. But we just never really saw that new manager bounce that a lot of other clubs do. It took him the best part of, I think, 8 or 9 league games to get a win, which when you are in a precarious position, that's a decent chunk of games that have gone without a win. So it was always difficult from the start for the reasons I've just mentioned. Yes, we showed a little bit of life, through sort of like March, April time, but ultimately when it came down to D-Day, the biggest game of our season on the final day, where we needed just a point, we were absolutely disastrous. And yes, that's not all on Bloomfield, but a couple of really strange calls in the lineup. We saw Naismith not play, and he'd been fantastic for us in the weeks before. So things like that didn't help. We move into this season, and it's really just not been good enough at all from the outset. We've played, and we've spoken about this every week, but we've played well for 3 or 4 halves of football combined across 11 games. And we've lost 5 games already. So ultimately, it's absolutely the right call. And yeah, I mean, it's a massive decision as to where we go from here, and what we can do to still get something out of the season.
And when he did come in last season, he did, as you mentioned, come in and really struggle to get that first win. It took a long time, as we've already mentioned. And at times it didn't feel like it was ever going to happen. But then with with 11 games remaining of the season, we lost just 2 of those games. But we lost the ones that counted, and we were obviously relegated pretty disastrously on the final day. And a lot of people at that stage called for him to leave then because of the way it ended. and that was after 22 games for the club. And in hindsight, it might not have been. It would have been harsh, but it might not have been the worst decision in the world because I think a lot of people could see there was clearly bigger issues that went deeper than Bloomfield, and perhaps he wasn't the man to come in and change that. We needed probably someone who had a lot of experience at the level, well, League One and the Championship, who could really change things.
Yeah, and it's really hard to look at it and say we needed to change it in the after the West Brom game because at the same time you're thinking, well, we have been relegated. We know there's going to be an overhaul an overhaul of the playing squad. You know, you've got a manager there that yes has not been able to avoid us getting relegated, but has started the process of changing the way we play, changing bits of like what he wants to implement. So you know, I think it would have been harsh to have not given him the opportunity over the summer to try and stamp his authority and the way he wanted to change the club. Um, but obviously, we're almost a quarter of the way through the league season, and he's not been able to show any sign, or basically up to now for the whole season has not been able to show any signs of that identity or style of play or anything like that. Um, and the board in their statement mentioned it's not just about results; it's about performances, and that is very very accurate. It's not just about 5 defeats; it's the fact that we've played and we've won 5 games. But how many of those games have we played well in? We've been fortunate in at least 2 of those wins. Um, so yeah, I do think it would have been a little bit harsh to change it in the summer. Um, I also think your managerial list of of replacements in the summer would be the same as they are now. I don't think we've missed out particularly on any higher caliber of manager, in the summer versus where we sit right now because we were a League One club as soon as we got relegated, and we're still a League One club now, albeit mid-table, but plenty of time to go to make sure we're not mid-table. So yeah, I think it would have been a little bit harsh in the summer, but it's certainly not a harsh decision that they've made. Yesterday.
You mentioned there was probably no other managers that we could have brought in the summer if we'd made that decision. I actually disagree. I think Brian Barry Murphy would have been a great option had we been able to wrestle him off Cardiff. If we'd had competed with them to bring him in, based on the two situations at the clubs, obviously Cardiff had a lot of issues with being able to bring players in at the time, and they'd also had a disastrous season. I think he would have been a great option in the summer, and he's been a manager that a lot of people have been looking at for quite a long time, obviously with his Man City links. And yeah, I guess he is someone that you look at and you think we may have missed out there, but who knows if the board would have actually been interested. It's hard to say at this stage. Obviously, Bloomfield, as in his exit, he also leaves with his assistant Richard Thomas, first team coach Lee Harrison, and first team analyst Ben Cern, which I think is quite interesting that not only is his assistant and coach gone with him, but also the analyst, which probably says a lot about a lot of the issues we've seen on the pitch.
Yeah, but I think they came as a collective. Um, so I don't think you can just remove the main man from the scenario when you're wanting to make a change. That's essentially a managerial group that we've appointed, led by Bloomfield being the face of things. So if you are making the decision to remove the main part, you have to remove the team with it. Now, I guess annoyingly for the board, that's 4 people that you've got to pay off. And we know that Bloomfield signed a 3.5 year contract back in January, so that's 3 years of pay for him probably, unless they do come to some sort of agreement. I don't know these days whether they say like we'll give you 2.5 years. I don't see why they would, because if I'm Bloomfield, I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to take a reduction. So I'm assuming they've paid him off in full, and I would imagine they've done the same for the same length of contract for the other guys as well. But I'm not surprised that the team that support him have gone. Um, Obviously, what it now says for us is that there are a few gaps to fill. So it lends itself to the thought of, do we go and get a manager that is experienced, that has a backroom team, that immediately he would know who he's going to bring in, versus an inexperienced coach, like an up and coming one who maybe hasn't managed before, who would need to kind of build a team of individuals to work with him for the first time. Um, so I think it may tell a little bit that we are perhaps looking down the more experienced route. But then again, it's very hard to read the board and their mindset, um, and it could be a name completely out of left field as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of names being chucked about, which we'll obviously discuss in the second part of the podcast. And I do think it's interesting there that you've suggested it could be a more experienced option based on the fact that his staff have gone with him. And I think maybe that's a promising sign that we are looking for a complete clean break from what's happened. And we want something completely fresh to come in, which is exactly what needs to happen, to be honest. I think a lot of Luton fans, and we mentioned on the last podcast that if change hadn't happened and we'd gone and lost another couple of games, obviously at the time of recording, we've just lost in the Virtue Motors Trophy away at Cambridge. But that's with Paul Benson, Kevin Foley, Kevin Pilkington, and Alex Lawless taking charge of the side. So it's probably one you can just sort of rule that out as a fixture because there's so much change has happened in the build up to that. But if we'd had gone and lost the next league game under Bloomfield, I think they would have lost the fans completely, and the board would have really lost the fans, as you mentioned in the last episode.
Yeah, and we spoke about this the other night that if Bloomfield survived the break, 2-week break, and we got to the next home game, um, and we didn't win it probably, then you've just wasted 2 weeks, and there would be the same sort of kind of toxicity around the place, a lot of criticism towards the players, the management, the board. Um, but they've obviously relieved themselves of that for now to a certain extent by making that decision. The problem they have now is that they have to make the right call. Now, obviously, that will be what we'll see in time, whether that is going to be the right call. Anyone that comes through the door, clearly we are going to back and get behind because they're likely to be in place for at least the rest of this season. But the fans need to something needs to happen to pull the fans back on side. And for me, and I say we'll come into it, but for me, that has to be showing serious ambition with this appointment, not not opening our purse strings and seeing how many pennies we can rub together and who we can entice. Like, we have to make a statement. That's the only way that fans are going to get pulled back on side. And as you just said, as we sit here and record this, we've just had another pretty embarrassing defeat to Cambridge, 3 goals shipped, um, which doesn't help. So yeah, it's going to be a big fortnight or week, whatever it will be, before they make the decision.
And we also mentioned that making the call to pull the trigger at this stage of the season with basically a 2-week break now until the next league fixture is the right thing to do. It needed to happen now if it was going to happen at any stage, probably before Christmas, because we have got that period to take a bit of time to figure out who's going to come in next, and they'll have some time to at least a week, you'd imagine, to bed in with the players.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't do it now, when do you do it? You're probably having to leave it until. I mean, you don't have to leave it till January, but the ideal time is now when you can. We don't have another game after tonight until a week Saturday, so you've got full focus on making the right decision, on interviews, um, without distractions of league fixtures and our league position. Um, so the international break is a graveyard, isn't it, for managers historically? Now you would think maybe in League One that managers would get away with that, but when you are having a squad like we do and we have international call-ups, that's it's done for Bloomfield, hasn't it? So yeah, it's absolutely the right time, and they've made the right call in using this almost 2-week break to reset and give us also enough games to kind of almost put this behind us a little bit, this first quarter of the season, and really try and kick on over the next 3 quarters.
And it is really key that we've not completely fallen away from the sort of that leading pack. We're still within pretty good reach of a lot of the teams in the playoffs and the top sort of 2 or 3 positions. And you'd imagine in a previous season, last season, for example, with Birmingham, Wrexham in the division, and even the season before that when you had Sheffield Wednesday and teams like that, we would have been nowhere near at this stage of the season based on how we started. But we've got lucky this season with sort of the way the other teams have gone about and not really run away with it. And you mentioned there that it is sort of sacking season, I guess, with this October international break. And it's not just us that's pulled the trigger. We've also seen Blackpool do the same and sack Steve Bruce. So that's another side who'll be looking at bringing in a new manager. But you would like to imagine we're not shopping in the same place for our next appointment.
Yeah, you'd like to hope so, but we are not going to be privy to what our budget is for our next manager. And let's not forget that the budget of appointing a new manager or changing things also has to account for whoever you're paying out. And as I just said, you've got 3 or 4 members of staff there with what we think is probably 3 years of contract left that we've paid out. So that's a reasonable amount of money gone. But you've got to be ambitious. I'll come on to names later on, but I personally think there's at least one name in the Championship that we could attract if you are willing to pay them the right money. Now, Luton historically don't throw money at anything apart from Power Court, but we have cash reserves, we have money to be able to go to a top target, even if they're elsewhere at a higher club or whatever, and get them out. So yeah, I mean, as you just said, I just pulled up the league table. We are fortunate that our performances haven't necessarily reflected our points, because otherwise we would be, you know, you'd think probably the top 2 already would be out of sight. But as it stands, they're not. 8 points off Bradford, 3 points outside the playoffs. That's nothing with 3/4 of the season to go. So the season is well and truly alive, and that makes it all the more crucial for us to get the decision right.
And at time of recording, we sit 11th in League One. No matter what we do, the others down the road still seem to do something a little bit more crazy, because it also looks like they are going to sack their manager in Paolo Pezzolano, or whatever his name is, probably incorrectly pronounced. They're also sitting in 11th in the Championship. So we just seem to have some parallels at the moment. I imagine fortunately, that is the only parallels we have is the league position. And our manager sacking is less ridiculous than the circus up the road.
Yeah, but it always is, isn't it? I mean, look, we're not in a position to particularly comment on what they do, because as I said the other night, we are basically the laughing stock of English football. But they don't have to give us a run for our money, even when we are as dire as we are. I won't comment too much on them, but I think that the ambitions of their board, is out of control versus reality, which is different to us because ours is probably reversed. Our fans' expectation and ambition is higher than that of the board right now. But a lot of Watford fans I know that are very decent people indeed. They understand where they are in the Championship. The board seem to think that they just change everything and they'll miraculously get a playoff place, which is unlikely to happen. But yeah, they certainly know how to get through managers, don't they? And they continue to do so.
And we'll be talking all things managers again in the second part of this podcast. Well, we'll be looking at who the bookies have got for the next Luton manager versus who we would like to come in. So don't forget to join us in the second half. But for now, check us out on social media. That's at Oak Road Hatter on all your social media platforms. And we'll be back very shortly. Welcome back to the Oak Road Hatter podcast. You're still joined by myself, Finley Cannon, and Adam Driscoll. And now we're talking all things the next Luton manager. And it's fair to say there's been a lot of names thrown around since Bloomfield left the club. So we're going to go through some of the bookies' favourites. So this is according to TalkSport Bet, and the latest odds have Jack Wilshere as the favourite, and he's evens on that list. And I just think that's. I mean, we had a lot of discussions outside of the podcast about that with yourself and I and a couple of the others as well. And I don't think he's someone that a lot of people are particularly keen on just because of how inexperienced he is.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say on the odds is that there was a time years ago that David James was 12-1 on to get the Luton manager's job and didn't get it. So, we know we know the odds are heavily influenced every time someone bungs on a few quid, and those odds will change throughout the next few days. But yeah, Jack Wilshere is evens as we look right now. I think for me, it's an intriguing potential in that I think it could be good. You've got a guy that played football international level for England, top level at Arsenal, and a very talented footballer. But you've got him as a limited coach. I think from memory, he's done a bit of Arsenal under 18s or 21s. He did a few games at Norwich as interim, and then has decided not to go back to Arsenal because he wants to pursue a career in coaching. I'm not convinced that we are the right club, or we're in the position right now where we need to be taking a chance on someone who wants to get their coaching career off the ground, or somebody that has got their coaching career off the ground but has limited experience. So yes, it excites me potentially about what it could be, but I just feel like it's not the right time for what we need, and what we need to deliver this season.
And you'd think if he was to go into any club, but not just ours, he would need a very experienced number two with him just to really sort of guide him through a league a season in League One. It's not a level he's ever played at that I'm aware of. I don't think he's ever played League One. For me, he's always been a sort of Premier League player, I guess. With injuries aside, obviously he had a lot of problems with injuries, which is why he's retired so early. As a lot of people on Twitter were pretty surprised that he had retired, and I think we're having a bit of a crisis when they realise that he's still quite young but has retired already. So I think, I mean, at the moment it looks like he is the favourite, but yeah, that could have been shifted by a lot of interest in the betting market. So it's difficult to say, but I don't think he's our favourite in terms of as a podcast and just as a fan base. It doesn't seem to be one that's really exciting people. I think you mentioned there that he would need time, and I think if we were appointing someone at the start of a season, going into a fresh season, I'd be all for Jack Grealish coming in. I think not Jack Grealish.
Jack
Don't worry.
Wilshere.
I'm not sure
Grealish
about
can come as player manager. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I'll let Grealish come in, but yeah, Jack Wilshere. Yeah, at the start of the season, he'd probably be a good option. He can implement really fresh ideas, and I'm sure he'd have a nice style of play. But
Yeah.
I think right now we need someone who's going to settle in pretty quickly and implement what they want to do.
Yeah, and
Brings
also just on Wilshere as well. Like, yes, he will have worked with other coaches in what he's done so far, but he's not. He won't have worked with them in the capacity of I'm number one. This is my number two. So that's he would have to sew together a team behind him and build those relationships that you do with an assistant manager when you're the head coach or whatever. And that again takes time, and time is something that whoever comes in isn't going to have a lot of. Yes, they will buy the board, but they won't have a lot of time from the fans' perspective, because we're going to want to see change. We're going to want to see, if not changes in good football, we're going to want to see results. So that's something that isn't going to be in their favour when it comes to someone with a profile of the likes of Jack Wilshere.
If we're looking sort of more close to home, that brings us to obviously Alex Lawless, who time of recording is 4-1 odds of getting the job. Obviously, he's just taken charge of the side against Cambridge, and it's gone pretty badly. You'd imagine that probably reduces his odds slightly by the time this podcast comes out, and he might decide he doesn't want the first team job at the moment. He wants to carry on in the academy and continue what he's got going on there whilst he sort of hones his skills.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's I don't. I've seen suggestions already of give it to Lawless, give it to Sheehan, get McCormack. Like, why? Why do we need to be sentimental with ex Luton? You know, returns never work. We've had players that have come back for second playing spells and it doesn't work. We don't need to go down the sentimental route. And for me, Lawless and McCormack, another one there. We don't need to do that. Let them do what they're doing now. Particularly, Lawless is doing a great job at lower levels with the younger guys. Let him carry on that. He doesn't need the pressure of management, and he doesn't need the pressure that the person coming in is going to get from fans. So I can't see that. I can't see why people are saying about that as a potential. It seems a bit bonkers for me.
Yeah, I think it's probably too soon for Lawless to go into the role. Maybe in the future it's a job that he'll be ready for, but at the moment he's still very inexperienced in that youth setup, I guess, and he is doing a good job, as you mentioned. You look at the players that have come through the academy recently, and they're really starting to bed into the first team. So clearly something's going right there, and it's a good opportunity for him to carry on there and keep bringing results there and bringing players through, which is the primary focus of the academy. So that brings us to the next person. And this is someone I really do not want to see come through the door at Kenilworth Road or the Brage. And that is Russell Martin. He's had an absolutely disastrous spell at Rangers where he had to have a police escort to his car at the end of his last game in charge because the fans were gathered around the team bus, basically not letting him on the team bus. And I think if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about how his spell at Rangers gone, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I think that is a little bit pathetic from Rangers fans. Like, he was going to get sacked at some point. I mean, that's just shambolic behaviour, isn't it? But the fact that only happened at the weekend, I think it's you can say what you want about like his football. He obviously did all right with Southampton, um, and likes to play football a certain way. But I think that experience being so raw for him, and also his persona in the media, it's when things aren't going right, there was no inspiration. It was a lot of blame. There wasn't like a load of accountability. And once he's the sort of manager that when the chips are down, I'm just going to be blunt and you know just not really what you want to hear as a supporter to the media. So yeah, I think for me that's just probably a non-starter. I don't see him dropping down to League One anyway. I think if he comes back to England, it will be in a Championship job, but it's certainly not the right time for someone like him, given his recent experience.
I think he'd probably clash with Luton fans quite a bit if he's as blunt as he has been at Rangers, and he's
Yeah,
so stubborn in his style of play. I just think
yeah,
he would lose the Luton fans so quickly if it was going wrong.
yeah.
It could just be a disaster from minute one there if something went badly. That brings us to a couple more that we're going to discuss who are more experienced and lower levels of sort of English football in League One and League Two. The next person we're going to discuss is Richie Wellens, who is obviously the current Leyton Orient manager. And he is someone who, on paper, I guess, would be a good appointment. He'd be a good pull. He's done a very, very good job at Leyton Orient, obviously getting them to the playoffs last season. He's got them playing pretty well this season, bearing in mind they lost a lot of players. Um, he's managed 190 games for them with a 48% win percentage, which is a really, really good record in the EFL. It's obviously a tough division to manage in, and he's won 91 games out of 190 for them.
Yeah, I mean, I to be honest with you, I hadn't realised his record at Orient was so good. I mean, I appreciate some. I think some of that was League Two, and they kicked into League One and have done well. Obviously, missed out in the playoffs last season. It's an interesting one. I mean, I wouldn't look at it and go. I wouldn't be like overly excited about it. But for me, I'm looking for a manager that can not only get us out of League One, but can establish us back in the Championship. And that's why I keep banging on about an experienced manager. Wellens has experience for sure, but would I look at him and say, yes, he can definitely get us out of League One and he can establish us in the Championship? I think the latter part of that for me is where my concern would be. Now, people watching this might look at it and go, well, yeah, but we're in League One. You've got to get that job done first. But I want a manager coming in now that is going to be good enough for now, good enough for the next step, and is going to be able to rebuild us over 2 or 3 years. I don't want someone that can just get us out of League One and then we just reassess and go with someone else to the Championship. Our board don't work like that, so that's not going to happen. So that's the reservation I have around Richie Wellens. Another name I think we were going to look at was Luke Williams as well, and I would probably apply the same rules there. I think he did well at Notts County, predominantly in League Two. Went to Swansea, little bit hit and miss in the Championship, and again for that reason, I look at it and go, yes, he'd probably improve us in League One, but I'm really thinking about that next step as well, and the next 2 or 3 years. So for those reasons, I look at sort of Williams, I look at Wellens, and I say, yeah, it doesn't overly inspire me without obviously being disrespectful to them.
And that brings us to the next option, and we're going to go with someone who is actually level in the odds with both Wellens and Williams, and that's probably surprisingly when they're 10-1, and that's Gary O'Neill. And it would be a big drop down if he was to come to the club. I'd be surprised if he was to drop down to League One. I guess we'd have to offer him a fair bit of money as well, because obviously he did pretty well in the Premier League, sort of with Bournemouth initially, and then with Wolves. Obviously, it went wrong towards the end, but he's an established manager now. He's done well at a higher level, and I can't see him dropping down to League One as good or as promising, I guess, as an appointment it would be. It just would be so surprising.
Yeah, I think it would be massively surprising. I just pulled up his stats. He's managed exactly 100 games, and yes, he's lost 52 of them, but all of those games have been in the Premier League, so you have to consider that. I don't for a second think he's going to drop down to League One. I think he could probably easily still get a Championship job at some point. To me, it would show a bit of ambition. I've always quite rated the way he's come across in his press conferences when you've seen it on like Match of the Day, things like that. He seems to have a calm personality, but will be a little bit fiery and feisty when he needs to be. And also quite kind of transparent and seems like a nice guy. So yeah, I wouldn't be against that one at all. I'd be absolutely amazed if even if we dig as deep as we can into our pockets, I'd be surprised if he dropped down into League One. So I wouldn't be amazed if his odds drifted out, over the next few days.
And there's a lot of other names being bandied about, but I scrolled a bit further down in the odds on TalkSport Bet, and one of the names jumped out at me a bit, and that's purely because of what I've seen from other people I know who know Scottish football sort of semi-well. A couple of people I know are Rangers fans, and that's Jim Goodwin, and he is the current Dundee United manager. He's 25-1 odds for the job. And I was looking at his record at Dundee United, and after getting them promoted out of the Scottish Championship, he had them finish fourth in the Premiership last season with a newly promoted squad. And then this season, he's got them still sat fourth. And his record in 113 matches for Dundee United is 52 wins with a win percentage of 46%, which, I mean, it's pretty impressive. He's got teams promoted before. He's got Dundee United promoted out of the Scottish Championship, and I guess the levels are quite difficult to tell between the Scottish divisions and also the lower levels of the Scottish Premiership and English football. You look at Shaden Morris; he's come over from a European club in Scotland to League One and sort of looks like a League One player. So it'd be difficult to sort of translate that. But from the outside, he's got a pretty good record and has had teams promoted previously. And it's not an idea I hate of bringing in a fairly experienced manager from another I guess, country, you would say, but Scotland and the Scottish leagues and the English leagues probably translate pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely say he's an experienced manager. Over 400 games managed up in Scotland. I think the issue I have is, as you've said a couple of times, the word translation. How does the Scottish Premier League, bar Celtic and Rangers, translate into the English game? We, as football fans in England, we often say that if you take Rangers and Celtic out of the Scottish Prem, you've basically got the equivalent of a lower end League One or League Two quality. So that's a problem for me, and that I think is potentially the risk there. I could see another League One club going in for Jim Goodwin, but can I see a club that wants to be a top end or top two League One club going in for him? You know, if Cardiff were to sack Barry Murphy tomorrow, which obviously they won't, I don't think you'd see Goodwin anywhere near the running. And I think that's the way we need to look at it. We want to be a top two club come the end of the season. Is Goodwin the right appointment for that? I'm not convinced that it gives us what we want, despite the fact he undoubtedly has a pretty solid record, and particularly over the last sort of 2 or 3 years. So yeah, it's probably not the one for me right now.
What names do jump out at you when you look at sort of the odds and when you look at anyone who's been banded around recently?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like I mentioned a couple of names on our pod the other night, and none of them are on the list. But that could be a good thing because previously we've not really appointed from a bookie's list, have we? They've come out of thin air, certain names. Um, there's no, I mean, there's a load of the managerial merry-go-round type names that are on the list. You've got Steve Evans 25-1. Absolutely no, thank you. You're shaking your head as well, so we're on the same page. Nightmare, never going to happen. I've got to say, I've seen some absolutely mental calls on social media around Sean Dyche, um, like I think Danny Roll. We might not want to admit it very much these days, but we are a League One football club. There is no way that Sean Dyche is coming to Luton. It's just not going to happen. So we need to drop that idea and those names and whatever. We can have ambition, but it doesn't stretch that far. So yeah, not for me. For me, scrolling through the list, there's not really many on there that I look at and go, get them to the club. I mean, what names stand out to you as being realistic, and also bearing in mind that we want to see success? Are there any on there that you think kind of tick both of those boxes?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because a lot of the names on the list, quite high up, probably don't tick both boxes there.
Mm.
Michael Scabala's got pretty good odds, 20-1. He's done well in over a sustained period at Lincoln, I guess, with smaller budget to work with. Really, I guess, good recruitment and scouting there. But he's yet to get a team promoted out of a division, having come close on a couple of occasions to the playoffs. So he's not someone that's managed to get a side out of a division before. Surprisingly, Michael Carrick is 25-1, which I was really surprised how sort of low those odds are. I think that would be an exciting appointment, but again, someone who doesn't have experience outside of a couple of clubs, and a lot of people saying that if or when Ruben Amorim gets sacked by Man United, he'll probably go in there and take an interim job there for a little while, which wouldn't be surprising. And then another name that's on there is David Wagner, and he's 33-1, and he's got sides promoted before in Huddersfield, and he always comes across really, really well whenever he speaks, and the way he composes himself sort of on the sideline in the media. I think he's a very likable manager, and he's managed in English football before, and he's someone that you look at and go, oh, he could be a good fit here. He's someone that engages with the fans a lot. When he was at Huddersfield, you saw him constantly going over to the fans and applauding them and sort of getting them cheering at the end of wins. Even when they got to the Premier League, didn't he keep them up in their first season in the Premier League as well? So he's someone with some pedigree, but also he's managed in the Championship before. And you look at him and go, where else is he going to get a job at the moment? How unrealistic is it that he'll get another job in English football soon?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a horrendous shout if I'm being honest. I mean, he's not had a job for nearly 18 months. I think he left Norwich in May 2024. But he left with a pretty good record. I mean, 41% win percentage. I mean, I look at it in managers these days and think anything above 40%, you look at and go, actually, it's pretty good. So, he's there for 18 months, 41% win percentage. Previously to that was at Young Boys for 40 games, 47%. Schalke, not great, but Schalke I think have been well documented about their kind of demise. So good fit for Luton. He's been at a club that's on a downward spiral, and prior to that did what he did at Huddersfield. So as shouts go, I don't think that is the most horrendous of shouts. I don't think he will be the next Luton manager, but there are certainly managers in the list that are shorter odds than that are pretty much nonsense suggestions versus David Wagner at 33-1. So yeah, an interesting one, I think.
Do you think the next appointment for the board is probably the most important that they've made in the last, what we'll say, 5-10 years?
On the face of it, yes, because what they are going to want to do now, ideally, is to appoint this manager as the manager that's going to lead us into power court. Because in theory, they're not going to want a short-term manager. So they're going to want somebody that can be here for the rest of this season and maybe the next couple. That sees out our time at Kenilworth Road and takes us into power court. And ultimately, the goal, as Gary Sweet said the other day, is to be in power court playing minimum championship football. So you can't look at it and say it's not a huge appointment. Now, obviously, it may not pan out this way. We may have other managers come in between now and when we kick a ball at power court. But ideally, this appointment is the one that's going to be doing that. So I think on the face of it, it is a huge appointment, not only for this season and using the remaining 3 quarters, but for that kind of like medium term as well. And finally, to get the fans back on side, as I've said before, like the fans have to get back on side, and the only way by doing that is for the board to make the right call, and we see significant change to what we've seen over the past 18 months or so.
It's going to take a significant appointment and a really, really positive start under whoever we bring in next to get fans back on side with the board as it stands, because you can see from sort of social media and even when you go to games as well now, a lot of people are starting to be really quite fed up.
Yeah, and we came on Sunday, and we were pretty brutal. We were pretty deflated. I said that the game against Stevenage was lingering more than any other defeat this season because of how abject and pathetic we were. Obviously, we've carried that on to tonight, to the game we haven't touched on at all. But I think it's best that we brush past tonight. But you feel a little bit less deflated now because we've made a change and we're trying to move on in a positive way. So yeah, it's just going to be a big call. I'm hoping that someone is in by ideally the weekend so that you can look at someone to start taking training on Monday, and then you've got a full week of freshness before we go into the Mansfield game.
Yeah, you'd like to think they'll take a little bit of time with this, so they'll take what's remaining of the week. So what at the time of recording that would give us Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, probably Saturday, and you've got someone in by Saturday evening, Sunday morning. I'd like to think that will happen. That probably will happen. I can't see it being dragged out much longer than that because it makes it all very last minute before the next league game against Mansfield, and then we've got a really hectic run of fixtures going into Christmas. But there's plenty to think about from today's podcast, so let us know your thoughts on everything we've discussed, whether that's Bloomfield's time at the club, the next Luton manager, and if this is the biggest appointment in 2020's time at the club. So from myself and from Adam, thank you very much for listening to this emergency podcast. keep the faith in the Hatters, and hopefully we'll be talking about an exciting appointment in our next episode.